Welcome to today's lesson, everyone. We are going to continue to talk about slope-intercept form. And again, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. But this time we're going to start applying it more to real life topics. And then just for everybody at home, so you guys know, tomorrow we are going to have a quiz on slope-intercept form. And then next Friday is our test over slope and slope-intercept form. So we have all next week dedicated to reviewing. So if you have missed a few days, hopefully we can kind of get you caught up if you have confusion over certain topics. All right, so let's talk about the first one. We have 3 problems today. So the first one, we have this nice little graph over here to look at. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these questions. So Nolan began with $26 in his bank account, and he is spending $2 each day. The line models the amount of money in his bank account. He incorrectly wrote an equation for the slope, or for the line in slope-intercept form as y equals negative 2x plus 13. Okay, so the first question is a super simple question, but so many people miss it because they don't understand what it's asking for. It says to identify the variables. And a lot of people don't even know what the variables are. And if we're dealing with a coordinate plane, we are always dealing with an x-axis and a y-axis. So when it says to identify the variables, what is the x-axis and what is the y-axis? Okay, so if you look at your x-axis, that is the number of days. I'm going to shorten it to just days. And then look at your y-axis, and that is number of dollars. Again, I'm going to shorten it to just dollars. And we're going to go to part B here. It says, what mistake did Nolan make? So I've had a few people kind of explain maybe what he did wrong, but if you look at just like the situation, when we are finding our slope and our y-intercept, our slope is always our rate of change. So what is it changing by, or what's that rate? And our b is always the starting point. It's like an initial cost or a fee that's charged right at the beginning. In this case, how much money did he start with? Okay, so if I'm looking at his equation, it says he started with 13. Maybe they looked at the x-axis and saw 13, but that's the mistake right there. He should have started with 26, and that is the b, or the y-intercept. So here I'm going to put the y-intercept should be 26 instead of 13. Okay, so what should the correct equation be? Well, we just said what it should be. Y equals negative 2x plus 26. All right, the next 2 questions, a lot of times are the hardest questions for people. So what is the slope of the line and what does it represent? So most people are fine with pulling out the slope. Remember, slope is our m. Okay, so what is the slope, or the m of this line? Well, that was negative 2. Now I'm going to make it a fraction just so I know how to explain it. But when we're talking about what it represents, we have to add in our labels. And we usually use the word per somewhere in there because per represents a fraction. Okay, so we see negative 2, so something's dropping 2. And if I look at my y-axis, because that's my rise over run, the number of dollars is dropping. And that's because Nolan, if you look at the kind of the situation, it says Nolan spends means negative, spends $2 per, and you can say 1 day, or you could just say per day. All right, last question here on this page. It says, what is the y-intercept? Sorry, I stopped my screen share there. It says, what is the y-intercept of this line and what does it represent? Okay, so again, our y-intercept is the letter B. Our B here, our y-intercept is 26. There you go. So the y-intercept is 26, and what does it represent? Well, it's the starting point, or Nolan's starting amount in his bank account. So Nolan started with $26 in his bank account. Okay, now we're going to answer some follow-up questions, and we're going to use this graph that they gave us to answer them. So how much money will he have left after 5 days? Okay, so 5 days, keyword there. So we're going to try to find 5 days. So here's days. I'm going to find 5. I'm going to go up until I hit my line, or Nolan's line there, and then I'm going to go over, and that's going to tell me how much money he's going to have left. So it says $16. Okay, next question. After how many days will he have $10 left? Well, notice this time it gives us $10. Okay, so I need to find $10. Well, here's dollars. Find 10. Go right this time until I hit my line and go down. It's going to be after 8 days. He will have $10 left. And the last question, when will he have no money left? Well, again, it's telling us money, no money to be exact. Okay, so I'm going to find my dollars. I'm going to find no dollars and go right until I hit my graph. He's going to run out of money at 13 days. All right, so that was example 1. And again, the graph was super helpful on that example. We're going to this one. Farah, use your imagination here. Farah is planning a wedding, and she has this giant outdoor tent that she wants all of her guests to sit under. Now, those things are not cheap, so that can kind of give you a visual. And they're also really big. So not only does the tent cost $500 per hour, it's so big that most people can't set it up themselves. And even if somebody did try to set it up themselves, they don't want it falling down on all of their guests in the middle of their wedding. So a lot of times companies will charge an initial fee for the setup. So here we have $100 to set up this tent. Okay, I'm going to skip A for right now, and I'm going to go to B first. And it says to write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. A lot of times I like to have the equation before I graph it, so that's why I skipped A. Okay, so I know slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Remember, slope is the rate. So what is the rate to rent this tent? And I'm looking for a rate, so remember, rates compare two things. So 500 per hour, that's my rate. So 500x. My b is my starting amount, and it costs $100 as your starting amount. And a lot of times that happens just one time. Okay, so now that I have my equation, I can graph this. Because it's my starting amount, I'm going to start my graph at 100. And then I'm going to use my slope, which was 500, up 500 over 1. So if I start at 100, I don't go up to 500. I have to add 500 to that, which would put me at 600. And I have to go right 1. So up $500 over 1. Now that makes my graph go straight up and down. And so we talked about how this graph was not the best graph, because I can't even tell you how much it's going to cost after 2 hours because it's already off the graph. So we're going to have to, when we get to those follow-up questions, we're going to have to start using a different method. So keep that in mind. But first, let's identify our variables. Remember, we have 2, the x and the y-axis. Well, our x-axis here, you can see, is hours, and our y-axis is our cost. And I'm also going to put the dollar sign so we know that we're talking about dollars. Okay, what is the slope and what does it represent? Remember, slope is our m. So mx here, so slope is 500. I'm going to make it a fraction so I can describe it. Remember, it's the rise over run, so if you need help explaining it, our rising axis is our cost, so $500 per 1 hour, per hour. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit more to it, because what is $500 per hour? The tent costs $500 per hour. I'm going to add to rent. All right, last question here. What is the y-intercept and what does it represent? Well, y-intercept is our b. That was $100. And a lot of times if you're given a situation, you go back to your situation and see what it says. $100 is the setup fee. It says it right there. So $100 is the setup fee. Okay, so now let's answer some follow-up questions, kind of like we did the last time. If you remember the last time, we were able to use our graph, but our graph this time was not helpful. I only have 1 point on it other than the starting amount. So if I can't use my graph, I have to use something else that we already created. And we already created our equation in slope-intercept form. We're going to use that. So our equation again was 500x plus 100. Now, I would normally find 5 hours on my x-axis and go straight up and down and figure out what my amount was. But I can't do that. Instead, I have to take my 5 hours. It's hours, so again, that's your x-axis. We're going to plug in 5 for our x, since it is hours. Now, one thing that people forget is that they will just say that their answer is 500 times 5, which is 2,500. They'll forget to add in that setup fee. So our final answer here, it would cost us $2,600. Okay, now this gets a little tricky for some people. Again, I can't find $3,600. It's not even on my graph under cost. Okay, so I'm going to use my equation, y equals 500x plus 100. Notice the last time they gave us 5 hours. This time they are giving us $3,600. They're giving us the cost. Our cost is our y-axis. So we're going to plug in our cost under the y. So 3,600 will go for y. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and solve this. This is a two-step equation. You guys were really good at these last semester. So we've got our happy couple, got to get rid of this outsider, the plus 100. So we're going to subtract 100 from both sides. That'll give us 3,500 equals 500x. And then we want to get x by itself, so I need to divide by 500 to get an answer here of 7 hours. So if our graph is not helpful, we're going to use our equation. All right, in class we'd have a commercial break right now, but we're just going to go to the very last question here. This one has absolutely no graph. Since the last one wasn't that helpful, we're just going to go totally without. So we have a plumber. A plumber charges $66 for showing up at a customer's house, and then $45 for every hour that he works. For a lot of people, A is tough to identify the two variables, okay, especially when there's no graph. When it's a graph, it's really easy. Without a graph, it's not as easy. So before I do that, I'm actually going to go down to B to help me out. I'm going to write a linear model, or in other words, a linear equation. So y equals mx plus b. I want to fill in my rate, and then also fill in my one-time charge, or starting point. So the rate, the plumber charges a rate of $45 for every hour. And then his starting amount is $66 just to show up at your house. Okay, so that's my equation, and that's my answer for letter B. But this is going to help me with letter A, because I want to know what x is. X is right there. Notice x is right next to our m, or our slope, or our rate that we talked about earlier. So since our rate is 45, I'm going to go up in the problem and find 45, and it's mx. So the x term should come right after our slope. So 45 for every hour. That x represents the hours. And then we're also trying to find one other thing. We're trying to figure out how much money he's going to make. And that is our y, our money. Again, I'm going to put in parentheses dollars so I know I'm dealing with dollars instead of cents. All right, next question. What is the slope and what does it represent? Well, again, slope is our m. Our m here is 45. I'm going to make it a fraction so I can explain it. So 45 something per something. 45. Let me pause the screen. My phone's ringing. All right, sorry about that. So we were answering this question about what does 45 over 1 actually mean in terms of the plumber? Why is that important to him? Well, 45 was our rise, or our y-axis, so $45 per. 1 was our run, so our x-axis, so per hour. And that's how much he makes. So the plumber makes. Okay, last question on this slide is, what is the y-intercept and what does it represent? Well, y-intercept is our b, so 66. Why is that important to this plumber? Well, sometimes you can just go back to the problem. It says plumber charges $66 for showing up at a customer's house. So $66 for showing up at a customer's house. I'm going to put he makes. All right, last two questions. So determine the cost of a 4-hour service call. Again, no graph, can't use a graph. If we can't use a graph, we have to use our equation. So y equals 45x plus 66. And this is where when we identify the variables, it helps us because it says a 4-hour service call. So let's go back. Which one was hours? Hours was our x. So we're going to plug in 4 for our x. And we need to solve this. So you can either do this with a calculator or you can do it by hand. We would do 45 times 4, which that would be 180, but don't forget to add in the 66 for the showing up at your house. That would be a total of $246. All right, last question. How many hours was he at the house if the owner paid him $156? Again, no graph to use, so use your equation. And since it was money, we can go back over here. Money was your y. So we're going to plug in 156 for our y. And we're going to solve this two-step equation. So we've got our happy couple, get rid of our outsider by subtracting 66. That gives us 90. And if I divide that by my x, or by my coefficient, I should say, and that's going to give us an answer of 2. So 2 hours is how long he was at our house if we had a bill of $156. All right, do not forget tonight you will have homework. There is a worksheet and there is also an answer key that you can kind of check your answers because there are a few problems that are a little bit tougher. Don't hesitate to send me a message on Schoology if you have any questions. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye.